Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to PKFX YouTube trading channel. This will be our weekly game plan. So today is Saturday and the market is pretty much closed right now. So it's a very good time to analyze the market for the upcoming week to see what the market is going to do or expected to do in the upcoming days. So I've pretty much listed down the few pairs that I'm interested in, and as usual we're going to be analyzing each and every pair over here on a weekly basis, daily basis, and 4-hour candle basis, the higher time frame. Alright, so without further ado, I'll start off with the first pair, AUD-CHF. This is a pair where the trade is currently ongoing. So on the weekly chart, you can see that we are currently bullish. So this is the higher high and higher low, and we are still bullish. The market had a reasonable pullback last week, and for this week it actually closed up bullish as well. My expectation is for the trend to continue the upward direction, and if I go to the daily candlesticks, the daily is actually a sell, where we have the daily lower low and the daily lower high over here, and currently it's making a pullback. Now because the daily is a sell, there can be a movement from the market to continue pushing towards the downside of it. However, because we managed to close above the EMA, the daily EMA that acted as a support over here in this region, and also above the round psychological number of 55,000, as you can see over here, the market has successfully closed above here. So it is in my expectation for the market to continue its rally until the TP zone over here. If I go to the 4-hour candlestick pattern, the market pretty much made a new higher high, higher low, and a new higher high over here. From the previous higher high, it is not that significant. However, the pullback was also not significant. So this kind of move, usually if it doesn't break down immediately, this can form some sort of a bullish price action with a bullish flag pattern that can essentially push upwards. However, we got to also bear in mind that it is pretty close to the next support and resistance zone over here in this box over here. So for me to continue to hold this trade, it has to significantly break above this zone, and that's when I'll be confident that it's going to go all the way to TP. At any point of time, if it goes above this zone and it starts ranging over here and starts reversing down, or even at this point of time if it starts going downwards and breaking this 4-hour EMA, that is not going to be a good indication, and the market may just go to the downside, right? Therefore, this particular trade, currently I'm still holding this, and I'll continue to monitor depending on how the market opens and how the market moves. I'll decide if I'll continue to hold, which I'm hoping to do, or I would need to close it on a break even or a slight losses. So that's AUD-CHF. AUD-CHF as a whole, we have the weekly buy, daily sell, and 4-hour as a buy, and I'm hoping that the market will continue to move towards the upward direction. There are some resistance point right above that it has to break and retest and make it into a support before it continues its journey upwards. AUD-CHF. Now, next pair will be USD-JPY. USD-JPY, if I go on a weekly candlestick, we can clearly see that it is actually in a very strong upward momentums with very small pullbacks. The pullbacks has been creating very strong weeks, so it has not been easy to enter this particular trade. But the daily is also showing a strong upward momentum. This is the daily higher high and higher low, and it had a good pullback and it came back again, and now holding above this round psychological number of 159.500. So if I look at the 4-hour candlestick as well, I was expecting it to come down here and make this area as a base before it moves up, but unfortunately the market actually dumped way stronger and then came back right to the zone that we were aiming for. So this was, to be honest, unexpected for me, but I see a good indication over here of a strong candle movement upwards and then just a strong consolidation up here. This once again it's like a bullish flag pattern that is expected to break upwards. So I'm expecting some sort of a trade over here. This is a good 1 to 2 risk to reward entry zones where the 4-hour EMA can act as a support, the round psychological number can act as a support, and I'm hoping to take a profit somewhere before the previous structure point comes into play, because I believe the market, when it comes close to the daily structure points over here, the daily candle closes over here, this area over here can act as a resistance. Therefore, this is my TP zone. So I see a solid 1 to 2 risk to reward over here. Could be a potential trade for the upcoming days. We'll see how it plays out. Next pair would be NZD USD. So NZD USD, if I go on a weekly candlestick, it has been dumping downwards. So weekly is a sell, and daily also it is a sell. It had a a reasonable pullback. However, it continued dumping again. So this is the new lower low, and this is the new lower high as of the market close. So any pullback, I'm expecting another dump, a continuation dump downwards. If I look at the 4-hour candlestick as well, it is actually nicely forming an area for a potential entry. I see a 1 to 2 risk to reward over here as well for this particular trade, whereby the 4-hour EMA is coming in to act as a resistance, the 57,500 round psychological number acting as a resistance, and this previous zone or area of interest can also act as a resistance. So any sort of pullback that gets rejected may be a good indication to enter, and I see a potential 1 to 2 risk to reward for a sell for NZD USD. Now moving forward, if I go to GBP CAD, now this pair, it can be a bit confusing because it's right at the decision point over here. As you can see, the weekly is a sell. This is our weekly lower low and lower high, and the market had a reasonable pullback. You can see two weekly candles closed very strong bullish. However, when it came to the EMA that was acting as a support all this while broke, and now it's coming back to make it as a resistance, right? Any support that gets broken acts as a resistance, and any resistance that gets broken acts as a support. But if I really zoom in, you can see that the market actually closed back above. So the weekly structure closed back above, and the following week also couldn't actually close below despite having this long rate week. The week actually closed above. So this is still acting as a support. So what I need to see is the following candle opening and then start dumping downwards. So usually this kind of indecision candle or doji candle closure tend to act as some sort of a temporary top, and the market has high likelihood to dump downwards. Now it's not necessarily were to happen, right? As you know, trading is all about probabilities, but I've seen similar pattern play out previously. So whenever we have, for example, over here, you can see whenever we have a strong upward candle followed by a doji candle, usually it marks a reversal, right? Whenever you have a strong upward candles and some sort of an indecision doji-like candle, usually it follows by a dump. So I'm expecting some sort of similar pattern to play out. Therefore, the weekly is also a sell, and hopefully this weekly trend will turn into a sell and continue to be pro trend, right? If I look at the daily candle, the higher high is here and the higher low is here. So this is actually bullish. However, if you see the daily EMA is closing above, right? So right now, this is acting as a resistance that is in support if we choose to sell. And if I go to the 4-hour candlestick, it is clearly a sell. This is your this is your lower low, and this is your lower high. Therefore, any pullback should eventually result in a downward momentum, right? So I can see a potential 1 to 2 that if the market continue to rally, we can also push to 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. But for now, let's just see what happens to the market first. Any dump and a pullback with the EMA, 4-hour EMA acting as a resistance on top of this resistance area, this would be a good point for a sell. So that's a GBP CAD. Now moving on. Next pair is GBP USD. If I go to the GBP USD weekly chart, what I see over here is a sell. Weekly is a sell, right? And the daily is a sell, right? Had a pullback, but it's continuing its momentum for a sell. And the 4-hour candlestick was also a sell. So any candle that didn't close above here at this lower high, right, will still indicate that all this is just a ranging section before the market continues to sell. So this is also a sell, right? Had a strong pullback, but it continued the direction of a sell. So we have weekly sell, daily sell, 4-hour sell. So obviously I want to go with the trend to sell, right? So if I look at the entry point for a sell, any sort of pullback to the round psychological number of 1.32500 with the EMA of the 4-hour coming as a support, I would say that's a good position to enter a trade. All right, depending on how the market opens, obviously. But the EMA for the 4-hour will act as a support. The daily is too far away, so no point looking at that. The weekly is also pretty far away, so no point looking at that. I would say this is a reasonable trade that I'm looking forward to, depending on how the market opens. Moving on, NZD JPY. So NZD JPY, the weekly, if I go to the weekly candlestick, the weekly was a buy. It had a strong pullback. It tried to push forward, but it continued to dump downwards. I think it's not done yet. I think this buy structure may just end up turning into a sell. Why? Because the EMA is coming up here, and the round psychological number of 90,000 or 90 in this case, right? 90.000 acts as a very strong psychological number, right? Round number, whole number, right? I believe these two will combine and eventually make a very good base. So maybe the weekly candle may just come all the way down here to retest, and if it closes like this down here, right, that's going to turn this buy structure into a sell structure, making that the lower low and this as a potential lower high. So we'll see how the market turns around. The daily is clearly a sell, right? And the 4-hour candlestick is also a sell. Once again, I see a potential nice entry location over here. If the market pulls back, meanwhile the EMA comes down as well, plus the round psychological number, plus this resistance area can help us to push downwards, at least to rally until this 90.000 mark, where we can consider taking profit before that whole number thing acts as a psychological barrier, right? So before it takes a massive push upwards. We gotta also remember that as long as the market is still going downwards, it is actually a counter trend trade, because despite the fact that 4-hour and daily is a sell, the weekly is a buy. So we gotta understand that the market is moving down only to be pushed upwards later on for the higher time frame. So that's NZD JPY. Euro AUD. Now, if I go to Euro AUD had a very strong sell momentum and reasonable pullback, and right now the market has closed. This is technically not a very good looking doji, but some sort of an indecision candle, right? So can it dump downwards? I don't know, but I see a potential of the market to continue to move upwards. Why? Because once again, the weekly EMA is coming down, and it has been having a continuous sell momentum for quite some time without any sort of reasonable pullback. As you can see, it has been so many months since it last came back to this area. So I'm expecting some sort of a good pullback. Not necessarily it can happen, but if I look at the daily candlesticks, has been putting a very strong upward momentum with a little bit of I would say like a bear flag. As long as this is not linear, but within the 45 degrees angle, as long as it is maintaining this structure, it is still some sort of a bullish bull flag pattern, right? So for it to confirm to me that it can clearly continue to rally upwards, I need it to break above the daily EMA. I need it to break above the support resistance zone. I need it to break above this round psychological number of 1.68000. I need all this to be broken and be retested to confirm that this is the new base before I can say, hey, you know what? The market is going to continue to rally upwards. Otherwise, it can easily dump downwards. And if I look at the 4-hour candle, it's a sell for now. But let's see how the market opens up. This is I see a potential trade here, but I'm not going to rush into this trade. If it happens, if all this clearly happens, then that's a clear 1 to 3.5 risk to reward trade over here that can actually turn out into a very nice trade. So that's Euro AUD. Moving on to CAD JPY. Okay, so CAD JPY, let's look at it on a weekly basis. This is your higher high, this is your higher low, so it is a buy with a proper pullback. So hopefully the pullback has ended because it is retesting these two structure points. So hopefully this weak candle will open bullish. Doesn't necessarily means that it has to stop here. It can always dump down over here because this also looks like a very strong base, so it can always come down here as well. Let's see how the market opens. But the weekly is bullish. The daily has been bullish over here. So this is the structure. This was the higher high. And as you can see that the market did not make any sort of significant turn until over here. So this is the higher low. And the market has made reasonable pullback. This is actually a very good pullback. So it actually closed slightly below the daily EME. If it closed above, I would have been more confident saying that it's going to rally upwards. But instead of making this EMA as a support, it made the EMA as a resistance. As you can see over here, if I zoom in, right, this red candle closed out, making this EMA, this orange line, as a resistance now. So I need to see once again a clear break above this resistance, turning it into a support. The support and resistance zone, this area of interest or zone of interest, whatever you want to call this box here, and this round psychological number of 115.000, it has to break all these things and then retest and make this area as a potential support before I can say the market would rally to give me a reasonable 1 to 2 over here. So that's on a daily. And if I look at the 4-hour candlesticks, the 4-hour candlesticks at the moment has printed a sell. So let's see what the market does. See, we can also see that the market can always make the 4-hour EMA as a resistance and this as a resistance. And instead of pushing it upwards, it can come and retest and start pushing downwards. And if that happens, right, it's a counter trend trade because your weekly and daily is positive, but your 4-hour is sell. And to be honest, to go against the weekly and daily is very, very, very risky. But if I zoom out, what can happen is the market can just, use that momentum to come all the way down here while the weekly and daily is still a buy. It can just come down here and then from here make the push upwards. So instead of the market doing this, the market could easily do this, right? And then just buffer over here before making the major move upwards. So two scenarios over here. We'll see how the market opens. That's CAD JPY. Moving on, Euro GBP. Now, Euro GBP, if I go to the weekly chart, I see that the weekly has been a sell with a good pullback, right? The daily had been a sell with also a very strong pullback. In fact, the pullback came pretty close to this area over here. If it broke this area, then the daily sell would have actually turned into a daily buy. So the market came to this support and resistance zone, this area of interest, and had a strong rejection. Now the market is pretty much buffering over here. And if I go to the 4-hour candlesticks, I can see that it's a buy, right? So weekly sell, daily sell, and the 4-hour was a buy. Obviously, it has to come to a buy to reach this zone. But if I zoom out in my original plan, I remember that this was the previous trade that I wanted to aim for 1 to 3. However, I closed out this trade earlier, but now I can see that if I chose to hold this trade long term, it would have hit my TP. So this would have turned up into a fantastic trade. However, I did not hold it, so it is what it is. Now that the market has already reached the previous target point, I'm expecting the market to make a major sell. So for me to sell, I need some significant indication that the 4-hour is also changing sell. For the 4-hour to change into a sell, it can always make a new higher high and a higher low and then break that higher low to make that as the new lower low and this as a new lower high. So if the market can do something like this, right? It can do something like this, right? and then from here it breaks it, right? At that point of time, this will be the higher high, this will be the higher low, and the moment it breaks this higher low, this will be the lower low, and this will be the lower high. So at that point of time, if I see any sort of pullback, that will be a good entry for a sell. So we'll have to wait and see if the market actually does all these things. It's very hard to predict when it's the 4-hour candlesticks, right? Obviously, the market can open and do whatever it wants, namely when the war is ongoing right now. So potential trade, but I've not really marked up anything over here. Overall, the up direction is completed. I was expecting this to continue downwards, so we'll see how the market moves. That's Euro GBP. Moving on to the popular pair that everyone trades, Euro USD. So this particular pair, the weekly has been sell for the past 1 month. It has been sell all the way, and the daily has been also a sell, but seems like it has been ranging for quite some time, right? And good thing that because it has been ranging, the EMA has also fallen all the way down. That can help us to act like some sort of a resistance now, right? And if I go to the 4-hour candlesticks, it was a buy, right? So any sort of pullback up here can work as a potential sell. But once again, like even though I'm going with the trend, weekly and daily is a sell, therefore it's with the trend. Gotta understand that putting this kind of stop loss, which is quite tight, right? Without any sort of additional barriers over here, just relying on the round psychological number and the support and resistance zone to hold, mainly when the 4-hour is a buy, it's quite risky because the market can always continue the buy momentum, pull back, and continue with the buy momentum, easily hitting the stop loss. So quite risky. That is why it's not one of my top pairs over here. I'm putting it down here. And finally, USD CHF. USD CHF for the weekly candlestick. The weekly has been printing a clear sell, which has pulled back all the way, and if it continues to break above here, the weekly will eventually turn into a buy. For now, it is still a sell. This is the lower low. If I follow this trend over here, this is the lower high. So lower low and lower high, and the weekly EMA is also coming down to act as a resistance. In fact, the last week it closed as a very strong doji candle. So if I zoom in, you can see the strong upward move and a very strong doji candle with the 0.80000 round psychological number acting as a resistance. So if I really zoom in, we can see that the candle closed below that, right? So it's acting as a resistance. This doji candle, right? Hopefully it would resolve into a downward momentum. Kind of risky because the daily turned bullish in order to catch back the trade over here. But I'm hoping the daily, eventually to have a dump. So maybe it's going to buffer for some time before it dumps. This is what I drew previously. But the ranging section is not just here. It has been ranging quite a bit. So very risky trade as well. And you can see the daily EMA is coming up as well. So if I choose to enter at any of these points, the TP might be affected by the daily EMA that's climbing up as well. So I'll continue to monitor to see how this particular trade plays out. If at any point of time this EMA comes up here and both the EMA and the round psychological number acts as a resistance and the market is down here, now all this can be my stop loss area. So then I'll consider for a sell. Otherwise, I'm going to just continue to monitor this particular trade. So that's about it, guys. These are the pairs that I'm looking closely into. AUD CHF, clearly I'm going to continue to hold to see how the market opens. USD JPY, I'm looking for a buy. NZD USD, I'm looking for a sell. GBP CAD, I'm looking for a potential sell. GBP USD, potential sell. NZD JPY, potential sell. Euro AUD, depending if it breaks above, potential buy. CAD JPY, depending if it breaks above, potential buy. And pretty much that's about it. Euro GBP, Euro USD, and USD CHF, I'll continue to monitor. So that's about it, guys. That's the weekly game plan, and let's see how the market opens. All right, thank you so much for your time, and have a good day, guys. Thank you.